What's up, guys?
Hey guys,
what's going on, everybody?
For Dummies.
We're guys on Scotch Street to help you with your next Scotch purchase.
Exactly.
And tonight we got a special guest. So it is Monday, and normally we are having a review to publish for you guys. And with what's going on in the world, we're not doing that right now. So we're trying to do some extra content live. And we brought you guys a guest from the other side of the Atlantic, someone from Scotland that we're excited because technically we were supposed to be touring a few of his distilleries here in a couple of months, and that's not going to happen. So we at least can have a chance to talk to him. But we've got Gordon Dundas from McLeod, and we're going to talk all things McLeod. Yes, we're going to get into Tam Do. Yes, we're going to get into Glengoyne, but they got a bigger portfolio than just that. So welcome to the show, Gordon. It's awesome to finally get you on.
It's a pleasure to be here, gentlemen, and I'm really looking forward to a great evening. Regards from lockdown in Scotland, and looking forward to just talking whiskey and talking great stuff.
So where at in Scotland are you actually located?
So I live in Glasgow. So I am living in, as I say to my friends in Edinburgh, Scotland's premier city. So I live in Glasgow. McLeod is based just actually outside Edinburgh, but that's very, its office is there. Glengoyne, not too far away from me. It's only about a 25-minute drive away. Tam Do, a little bit further. And of course, our other distillery, Rosebank, which we're currently building, is not very far away either, about 45-minute drive.
We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But okay, so Glasgow, I got to ask, are you friends with another good whiskey tuber, Roy Aquavite?
I am. I know Roy well. He's another big Glengoyne fan. And I was actually on his show in about October last year talking about, he decided he wanted to know everything about sherry casks, so he asked me to come on the show. So I was like, really? Okay. But, we do a lot with sherry casks across Glengoyne and Tamdhu. So I've been to Jerez and all those wonderful places, so I could instill a little bit of knowledge about sherry casks.
But in your current role, you're the international ambassador for McLeod, right? So you're global.
That's right. Yeah. Just not right at the moment, but yes. So I am my main markets. I mean, our main markets are no real different to anybody else. I mean, obviously the US is a hugely important market for us, and a market which is really growing for us, which is great. Canada, good market as well, and then Europe, Germany, France, the UK is a very important market for us, and then of course Asia as well. So China, Taiwan, Australia, they're our main sort of key markets, but there are many others. We have the #1 selling whiskey in Myanmar, I believe. There you go.
Wow. So
which whiskey
before
is
we
that?
dive into some meat and
forgot his name.
potatoes, who do we got on? I want to say hi to a couple people that are tuning in on a Monday evening. I see Bob and KB. I see Hoagie's in Germany. How you doing? Jimmy T. Who else we got? Whiskey Mystery. Somebody's talking about Rosebank too. And I want to ask. Let's go around the horn and see what everyone's drinking. I'm actually drinking an McLeod. It's a Shildake 18.
Nice.
Andrew, what do you got?
I'm drinking a bit of that teapot dram. Glengoyne teapot dram.
Yeah, I am. Oh,
This is empty.
I'm drinking something else. It's Glengoyne Batch Reserve, but I'm wishing it was this.
And what are you drinking, Gordon?
I've got the Glengoyne 18, which at the moment is my go-to Glengoyne. I'm loving it. It's a wonderful whiskey. So I'm drinking that, which is great because it's obviously 10 o'clock at night over here. So,
but why perfect. That one over other ones? What's special about the 8? Why is the 18 touch you right now?
I mean, Glengoyne doesn't produce anything that's not great, but just with a nose in front, for me, it's just because we use a great balance of first fill and refill. I think there's just got this real sort of stewed fruit note and this sort of, it's like a cooked dessert, a cooked fruit dessert for me, with a bit of that maltiness in the background and gentle cinnamon spiciness. It's superb.
Man, I think it was 2 years ago. I picked a Glengoyne. It was the 21 or the 25 is my whiskey of the year. Glengoyne, they can put out some really good whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, we're a small distillery, but yeah, I mean, we're a family-owned business. I think that's the first thing to really talk about. You know, we're a business that's owned by a family. We're not a multinational. We're nothing of that. We're not a insignificant business, but we're not a big player. So we focus on, you know, the quality of the whiskey, and that's at the forefront of everything that we do. So you know,
that leads to the first real question I had for you, though. And you're talking about Ian McLeod in general, right? Ian McLeod's a family-owned business, and so when I look at the brands, it's still a pretty wide set, you know, breadth of brands. It's not. I mean, obviously, we can talk about Glengoyne and Tam Do, but when I hit the brands link on Ian McLeod's website, man, there's gin, vodka, rum, blended whiskey, malt whiskey, single. I mean, that's a pretty healthy list.
Yeah. And you know, it's a big world, so we sell a lot of them in different markets, and you know, certain whiskeys are very popular in certain markets, and other ones, and they're not sold in any of the other markets. So you know, certainly, just a very brief history. That Ian McLeod was everything but a producer in the whiskey industry until 2003. So they were originally sort of they were sort of blenders, and they were in the middle of they were always in the middle of the industry. They were, you know, quite happy to sort of you know, move casks around the industry, move whiskey around the industry, which is obviously what still happens today. And then, of course, blenders, bottlers, and then actually it wasn't until 2003 that Glengoyne was purchased as their first distillery. So that was only 17 years ago. So we now have, you know, 3 effective Scotch whisky distilleries, which is a real change in a short time. So the history of Ian McLeod has a bearing on why there's so many brands.
That makes sense, especially considering it's only been 17 years since you've got. I see how you can acquire that list came together a little bit better.
Yeah.
So do you distill all of your gins and vodkas and things too at other distilleries, or where do you have all that material?
So we have a lot of our main gin that we have is Edinburgh gin, which is a very big gin over here. Gin in the UK is crazy, and has been in ridiculous growth for 3 or 4 years, and now obviously a little bit flattened out a little bit now. But we acquired Edinburgh gin about 3.5 years ago, and it's so we own the distillery for Edinburgh gin. The other products, a lot of them we you know, they're not done ultimately by us, if you know what I mean. Some of them are contract distilled.
So what
depending on the market.
The rough liters of alcohol per year for Ian McLeod, if you can say? I mean, I don't know what, as a private company, it's a little different, but
there's a question. There's a real question. I mean, you know, from our perspective, probably I can only really tell you from a whiskey perspective. So we have Glengoyne is about a million liters a year. Tamdhu is about 3.5 million liters a year. So there's 4.5 million liters, obviously, of single malt spirit. But we have other requirements around the industry that we need grain spirit and things. So there's as we all know, spirit and whiskey gets moved around the Scotch whisky industry.
Of course, yes.
So that's sort of how it works.
Wow. So it's not trivial. It's for a family business to make a lot of whiskey.
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, Glengoyne's a small distillery, but we fill pretty much everything into casks for single malt. Tamdhu, because we only use sherry casks at Tamdhu, you can only get effectively a certain amount of them through our suppliers.
Right.
So 3.5 million liters of Tamdhu is not all going into sherry casks. I wish it was. It's not. So probably about 10 to 15% of Tamdhu is going into sherry casks each year. The remaining 85 we use for other parts of our business.
Oh, wow.
Wowzer. How many people does Ian McLeod in general employ then?
There's a question. I think it's probably about somewhere between 150 and 200, I think. So again, not an insignificant business, but it's a family-run business, and it's a real family. And it's a great a great sort of environment to work in, because the the ethos comes from the owner, Leonard, and he is a wonderful sort of character of the industry, beautiful, well respected around the industry, and really focuses on, we want to produce the best we can.
So let me ask you about with this. I've noticed this in other companies that have a few brands. Do you guys share information across your brands under the Ian McLeod, umbrella? I mean, obviously, Glengoyne and Tam Do are competing against each other for shelf space. But is it uncommon for somebody at Glengoyne or Tam Do to pick up the phone and call somebody at one of the other distilleries and say, "Hey, you mind coming up here? We got a problem. I just can't get this figured out. Something's going on." Or is it close enough family knit like that, or is it
totally, absolutely? Yeah, I mean, different brands for sure, one family. So, while Tam Do and Glengoyne are, the one thing that really links Tam Do and Glengoyne is the sherry casks that we use. They come from the same suppliers and they go to each. But very different distilleries. But there's no, for example, a lot of the tour guides at Glengoyne have been up to Tam Do so that they can understand Tam Do and talk to people about Tam Do in a way that, that they understand Tam Do, as not maybe as much as they do Glengoyne, but they're hugely aware of Tam Do. So yeah, that's really part of our. We are a family working together. So even gin and whiskey, we are working as under the one umbrella.
I mean, I think over the last couple of years and meeting people in the industry, it is a little bit incestual in the fact that people do move around. I mean, there are stories of people working at one distillery for 25, 30, 35, 40 years, but there are also the majority of them that will, understudy here and then move up to another position over there. And sometimes they're outside of, family or corporate umbrellas, going from one distillery to another. So it is kind of a smaller world than people think, I in my opinion, but you're closer to it than I am.
Well, I mean, look, it happened to me. I mean, I used to work for Bowmore. I to work for Bowmore, and when it was owned by Suntory, and then obviously in 2014 Suntory bought Jim Beam and became Beam Suntory, and I was working for them at that point, and then I left there in 2017 and moved to Ian McLeod. So what was very interesting then was really understanding how Suntory do business was a really interesting part of that journey for me. But now working in a family business, slightly smaller than the Suntory family business, is really exciting because you get involved in so many different things. So, people do move around, and then you have people like this gentleman here who's single cask, for example. After 43 years, Duncan left Glengoyne. He's the man you probably see in most of the pictures, and retired after 43 years and selected a single cask. So he'd been there for 43 years, but there's people in the industry who've been 50 plus, 55 years.
Right. Wow. I see a question that I can't ignore over on the YouTube chat from Krasimir Jelsic. When will Rosebank production start? I think a lot of people want to know the answer to that, so I figured I'd get it out of the way.
Yeah. Well, we are currently constructing, and certainly we're hoping for 2021. Obviously, with what's going on at the moment, things are a little bit fluid on that, but we're certainly, but we're hoping that we'll be open in 2021. But and producing spirit, but we just don't quite know. Everybody's in a little bit of a flux at the moment,
So is Rosebank going to have a visitor center as well then? Since you have the ability to make that happen right now?
Yeah, so we're going to have a visitor center at Rosebank. We have Glengoyne is one of the most visited distilleries in Scotland. Tamdhu you can't visit at all. So we sort of have, one extreme and the other currently. Rosebank obviously being such an iconic lowland whiskey, and very near Glasgow and Edinburgh. It makes sense to obviously have a visitor centre, and we want people to and what's amazing about Rosebank is it's obviously Falkirk is the is the area that it's been in. And what's amazing about it is that all the locals are so supportive of it. So we want them to be involved as well. So we're very excited about Rosebank as well, because it literally is a classic whiskey.
So how
Are you guys
with Rosebank? How much did you have to rebuild? What's the kind of plan? Is there a plan to try and remake the same spirit, or is it a new Rosebank spirit?
Well, it's not the same distillery. So let's be quite honest. It's not the same distillery. The only thing that's remaining really of the old distillery is the chimney. All the stills have gone, were stolen. All the copper was stolen, famously, and the site was a bit of a mess. So it is a complete rebuild of the old distillery on the same site. What we will do, though, of course, we're using the same shape stills. We will also use the same type of worm tub condensers. So we want to produce a Rosebank spirit that absolutely reflects old Rosebank.
Old Rosebank, okay.
So it's not going to be totally different. We're not going to produce a peated Rosebank or something like that. It's going to be triple distilled, which a lot of lowland whiskies were back then, and Rosebank was, but then had that mad sort of idiosyncrasies about having worm tub condenser, which you would consider for more heavier style whiskies. So that's probably why it was a little bit unique.
Triple distilled but heavy, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean that's why Rosebank, I think, is such a sort of fruity floral whiskey, but it has this weight to it as well.
So just so you know, the fourth dummy that you had asked where he was before the show, Sean, he logged onto the chat on YouTube, and he said he made it for the show, but he's still working, just popping in, and he wants you to know that he is excited about Rosebank.
All right, good.
Who isn't excited about it?
Right, exactly. Actually, Graham Fraser had asked, he drove by not too long ago. It wasn't much long before it was before the lockdown. Have you guys made progress since the lockdown, or is everything just shut down? No more
there's not a lot going on at the moment. There's not a lot going on at the moment. Construction in Scotland is basically shut down at the moment, apart from essential construction, from what I understand. So I don't think there's a huge amount of progress at the moment, because you've got you cannot construct things by staying 2 meters away from the person next to you. It's just not how it works. So that's a little bit of it's just the way things are. But we're hoping that we've got a really strong vision. We've got a great plan of what it's going to look like, and it's going to be a wonderful addition to the Falkirk area. So we're very excited.
Well, I see another comment from somebody on YouTube. It says, from Ben Marnock, was born 400 yards from Rosebank and proud to be a Falkirk Bairn.
Right. The Bairns are the local soccer team.
Oh, that makes sense. Good. Oh, that's awesome.
And also
let me go into how do you think things are shaping up? I mean, honestly, in your position, your whole job has been changed. You've kind of been shut down. You were a globetrotter and an international ambassador. You need to be on the road. You need to be in planes, trains, and automobiles, and getting around doing whiskey fests and tastings and education.
Yeah.
What's happening now? Obviously nothing, but what's going to happen? How is this affecting you guys in the long run? What are you expecting?
I'm expecting a couple of things. I mean, I'm expecting that I still will travel, but I think we're going to be in a little bit of a different place after this. I think personally, I think there's going to be more of this type of thing going on a lot of the time, and I think that's a good thing. But as I always say to people who say, "Oh God, you travel quite a bit," and I do travel a bit, but I mean, what I was saying was, I'm not selling bricks here. I'm selling whiskey, and whiskey is a product that's social. It's convivial. It's you want to drink whiskey with other people. You want to talk about things. That's how it works. And so if you can do that with an educational perspective, getting people to understand why your whiskey is not better than others, different, why it tastes different, that's a really strong element. So I spent a lot of time in Asia. I lived in Taiwan for a year, and I will spend a lot of time in the States as well, because it's such a big market. But yeah.
We enjoy your spirit here in the United States. That's for sure. Actually, somebody
So
asked,
is your marketing group working on ways to do tastings remotely? Can you like sign up for something and then you'll send a bunch of samples to people and then you could schedule in a call and do something like that? Or what's kind of the thought on that?
Yeah, no, we're working on all those types of things at the moment. So I mean, we are working across our markets. I just did before I was on with you, I was actually beaming into the Netherlands, and we had 10 retailers sitting on Zoom or whatever it is, and we were talking about Tam Do and Glengoyne in relation to them retailing it and things like that. So you can do consumer things, you can do trade elements, you can do a lot of different things. So yeah, I mean, I think the whole Scotch whisky industry can look at what's happened and take a lot of what's been developed over the last month and probably over the next couple of months and move it forward to add to the overall sort of consumer experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what this has done is kind of catapulted the whole YouTube, the video, the marketing craze, where you guys knew it was there, but now everyone's getting forced to kind of do it now, and it's opening up doors and opportunities for different things and ideas.
Yeah, and as I said, what's great about the whiskey industry is that there's a very strong working together ethic, and particularly in the Scotch. I've also seen it in the bourbon industry. I've spent a lot of time in Kentucky. Tough times, obviously, as you can imagine, in Kentucky. But I used to work for Whiskey Magazine before I started doing my ambassador role in 2011 with Suntory at that point. And so I spent a lot of time in Kentucky and got to know a lot of the Kentucky guys who make the whiskey down there. And and what you notice you go down for the bourbon festival and things like that is there's this real working together, promoting the category of bourbon. Back then, that was probably 10 plus years ago. There wasn't as many bourbons outside Kentucky as there are now. There's many more sort of bourbons made all over the US, but most of the sort of big 8, big 9 distillers were really working together, which was really good. And the same in Scotch. And I think when you do that, you can do elements which give you a sort of tasting where you have 4 or 5 different people like me talking to 30 or 40 consumers. And it's a really interesting, interactive, sitting at home, drinking your whiskey in the comfort of your own home.
Well, do you think that when this is all said and done and we finally get over this and maybe back to a semblance of normalcy, will you see the same number of whiskey events? I mean, look at all the major whiskey events that have been canceled. Face Shield, there's tons of whiskey fests, things that so many different whiskey things that are just shut down. Do you think that'll at least pick back up and get back to where it was, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there'll always be a few things that I think will drop off the radar. But I mean, I think whiskey fests look at Whiskey Fest. It's probably the biggest set of shows in the US. And I think they're all postponed at the moment. So I think they'll probably all be in the latter half of the year, assuming things go like that. Face Shield will always happen. It's just not happening this year. The Speyside Whiskey Festival is the same. But I think, there'll be 1 or 2 stragglers. But I think there was probably getting to a point there was so many whiskey festivals. I mean, I don't go to whiskey festivals really that often. But when I do go, you go and you're focusing on particular aspects in maybe a masterclass or something like that. But there's you could go to Germany and go to a whiskey festival every weekend. Holland.
I need to move to Germany.
Yeah,
No, you don't.
Holland every second weekend. I mean,
I'm Polish.
then in France, there's hardly any whiskey festivals. But funnily enough, it's one of the biggest whiskey markets, mainly blended, in the world. So, there's a lot of whiskey festivals, which is great, but you can't do all of them.
Well, we did a fair number of them over in the States over the last couple of years. And I think even if this wouldn't have happened, we were kind of already, I think we made our mind up we were going to skip this year's on most of the Whiskey Fest, because they're just, you do one in New York, it's really the same one as in Chicago type of thing. But it's good to get out there and see people face to face. As awesome as this is, it would be much better to do this face to face over a dram.
Absolutely. I think going to whiskey festivals, of course, if you're not you know, if for an individual who's sort of maybe trying to get into whiskey, it's a great opportunity to talk to lots of different people.
True.
It is a great
True.
opportunity to do that. But also, you know, from a lot of people's perspective, it's meeting all those other people as well. You know, learning about whiskey from either a distiller or an ambassador or someone that you've met in the line who's having dinner or whatever. So I mean, I think they do still have a very valid place, but I think, like everything, whiskey festivals need to evolve, and this is what we're doing now, and what we're seeing now is much more evolving. And I think you can do more and more of this type of thing. So you could do a masterclass to 35 people in a room in wherever, and the guy doesn't even have to be there. In theory,
that's true.
I'm not sure the experience would be quite as good, but that's the kind of things you can do.
Yeah,
right.
we did a Tam Do whiskey Facebook Live last week. Did it on Tuesday last week, and I was sitting here, and Sandy, who's the story manager because it's shut down, was in the still house, and we did a tasting, and he wandered around the still house and showed people just with his camera. It was a little bit, but it was brilliant, and the feedback we got was like, I've never seen one like that before. You know, it was great.
I want to do that right now. Get Sandy on the phone.
Yeah,
he was going to take good care of us in June. We were actually going to bring a busload of dummies to his distillery.
No, we'd love to have you there.
Actually, there's a couple of really good comments here. Ben, our Fairkirk guy, has got some good questions for you. But before I get to that, there was actually Kresimir, your Glengoyne question. I'll get back to that when we start talking more about Glengoyne. But Ben has a couple of good questions. And Drew, if you could do me a favor and grab his town motto from Falkirk and put it on the screen. I want everyone to see it. Do you know the town motto of Falkirk, Gordon?
No, I don't. I'm afraid. No, I don't. If I'm
better meddle we the deal than with the Bairns of Falkirk.
I think that means in English, I would suspect, means better meddle with the devil than with a child of Falkirk, I think, or with the Bairns of Falkirk. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. Yeah.
That's what he said. But he actually had a good question about triple distillation, and I want to throw it by you. So how does triple distillation, which is lighter, marry with worm tubes and less copper contact, therefore a heavier spirit?
In theory, it doesn't. But hey, that's whiskey. That's the key point. In theory, it wouldn't. It doesn't. You know. So if you look at certain distilleries, let's go for a great whiskey, Craigellachie, very very known for its meaty sort of character because it has worm tubs. But triple distillation does promote more copper contact. So you would normally expect a sort of shell and tube condenser setup with that. Certainly at Auchentoshan, which is a triple distilled whiskey, it just had it was a spirit still, an intermediate still, and a wash still, an intermediate still, and a spirit still, and normal condensers. Rosebank's going to be triple distilled, but just have totally different condensers, and I think that's why not. You know, we have all done things that are a little bit different and creating things that are different. Rosebank has got to the position it has these days in terms of its sort of how it's thought of because of its unique style. So we want to recreate that.
Yeah, there was a follow-up question back when we were talking more specifically about Rosebank. So you had said that hopefully the plan is to maybe be actually, cranking up the stills in 2021. Do you know what the plan is for Rosebank as far as bottling? Are they going to actually try to get something out early, a young spirit like a 5-year-old? Are they committing to waiting to 12? What's their, do you know the strategy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, again, this is, yes, I've got a rough idea. I mean, the plan will be to fill it. It was mainly matured. And so we use a lot of sherry casks at Glengoyne and Tam Do. Mm-hmm. Rosebank probably didn't use very many sherry casks at all, maybe refills. What Rosebank was filled into mainly was refill bourbon or refill hogsheads. So American oak, pretty much refill or remade hogsheads. It suited a lighter style of maturation because of its fruity style. and so most of the Rosebanks that you see in any of the marketplaces or whatever are all ex-bourbon or refill hogsheads, not sherry casks. So it does actually mature pretty well, of course, because it's a lighter spirit, and so it does seem to mature a little bit quicker. But we're not going to be rushing anything out at 3 years in 1 day or 5 years and 5 years in 2 days. I think it's probably be, I would guess eight maybe, but only if it's good.
Is that because Rosebank is under the family umbrella of Ian McLeod, whereas you get a new distillery, young distillery like Wolfburn's a great example. Over the years, I mean, it opened its doors, and they had to get some spirit out as soon as they could to get some cash, keep the lights going, right?
Don't everybody? Yeah, no, I mean, look,
right.
we obviously the historic sort of, there's been so many whiskey distilleries. There's 133 in Scotland now at the moment, and if I had £10 million and I was, which is about the same as $10 million at the moment, and I was gonna buy a whiskey distillery or invest in a whiskey distillery, of course you need to get some of your money back, because all you're shelling out for at least 3 years is all the raw ingredients, all the casks, all the storage, everything that goes with it. Of course you do. So yeah, but we're lucky enough we have other parts of our business that can allow us not to need to do that. So I can pretty much sure there won't be a Rosebank gin.
that was the question.
I bet you could sell the heck out of some Rosebank White Lightning.
Well, you can do that, but gin, no.
I see Greg's Whiskey Guide says hello, just joining after a live Ear Whiskeys channel.
I can't keep up with what's going on in the whiskey sphere of what's going on online. Tube. Yeah, exactly. And there's just things on every night, and it's great. You can drop into whatever you want to drop into.
That's for sure.
It wasn't that way 5 years ago when we started, but it's definitely getting to be more busy. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. It's not. I don't think we have ever considered ourselves in competition with any of them.
No, I think everybody has their unique element, and I watch quite a lot of different ones. So yeah, no, I think there's some good stuff. Of course, huge fans, guys, huge fans.
Kresimir wants to talk about Glengoyne, and I think we want to talk about Glengoyne too.
Okay.
I'm disappointed in myself. I'm not disappointed in myself. I'm upset that Andrew still has some of that teapot left, because we all got our bottles at the same time, and the fact that he still has some.
That's gonna use the pee.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the lover. So, out of curiosity, the first question I'm going to ask: is there any more teapot batch 7 at the distillery right now?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there was. It was a bigger batch, and obviously, just with the way things have been in the beginning of the year, we had a huge amount taken up in the launch. But there is still some available. So if you have a secret person who can, you can't actually go there at the moment because it's shut down. But you can. It can be ordered online.
Oh,
it can be ordered online.
But not to the US though.
Right.
So I don't know how you got your other. Did you get them through a friend or something?
We're not telling.
Okay.
Question way back in 517. It's like a series of questions that I'd like to cover for you that's really good. So he starts out saying he's a big fanboy of Glengoyne, loves it as it is. The quality of price ratio is one of their greatest things they had. I mean, Glengoyne, especially for the teapot dram. Then we go to the next section. The teapot dram is leagues above its price point in terms of quality, but this year it came a significant increase in price, and it caught a lot of people off guard. A lot of people got a little upset about it, but finally, he appreciates it's a sticky point. But what is the philosophy of Glengoyne with their price to for the teapot dram over this last year?
Well, it's a pretty simple. I mean, it was £90 for 4 or 5 years, something like that. It didn't go up in price at all, and it was generally you know, it's always been a young whiskey. You know, generally sub 10 at you know, high strength first fill European oak. And this one was different, and this is where we added in difference, and this is where, you know, we take a little bit of flack because it's a no age statement, but it's always been that. But my point is, we put in older whiskey. We put in a lot older whiskey, 13, 14-year-old whiskey in there this year, because it really was what John wanted to do in terms of create a different style of teapot dram, because you want to have a theme, but just have a little bit of difference between each of them. A bit like the batch strengths that we spoke about. So, yeah, no, I appreciate, you know, £30 on the face of it seems a lot to people, and I totally get it. But certainly from our perspective, you know, we put in a lot of older whiskies this time. So it's got the oldest profile of all teapots. But as you say, if you don't, you know, it's just it looks like every other teapot. So a lot of people take it for what it is and go, well, it's £30 more, but what's the difference between this and the last year one? I totally get it. But when you taste it, my gosh, it's really hit the spot. So I've called it the Bond teapot this year, 007. So you know, I'm a huge fan of it. I love the teapot dram. I'll always love it. I've always loved it. But yeah, look, I don't disagree. But what we have noticed is that the sales are still fantastic.
Yeah, right, because it's still good.
Yeah, and that's exactly. I'm glad to hear the rationale for it. You know, people will say one thing and think it's just the same thing as all other teapot drams, same as before. They just wanted to make more money on it, but it's a different mixture. It's a different batch. The bigger batch got some older whiskey in it, so that makes some sense to understand that. Gregor says he bought 4 teapot drams. Lost one sadly in the airplane's belly crush. Ooh.
Oh, that is unfortunate.
I hate that. But there's also another, since we're on Glengoyne here, Sunday Evening Scotch had this question. Would Glengoyne 15 ever make a return? He's sipping from his last one now and loved it as a great value between the 12 and the 18. What is the current profile of Glengoyne, and why did they pick what they've got?
Well, I'll tell you. So the range used to be a 10, 12, 15, 18. There was a cask strength as well, 21, 25, 30. We dropped the 15 for a couple of reasons. Stock problems in terms of, we bought the distillery 15 effectively about 15 years ago when we had it's been gone for about a year now. So obviously there was an element of rundown, there was an element of pickup, there was a bit of a hole. And so the way that we looked at it was, we could continue to produce it, but we would be using quite a bit older whiskey than 15. And that doesn't make any sense because that really doesn't make any sense in terms of using 18, 19-year-old whiskey in a 15-year-old. Yeah. So what we wanted to do was to be able to protect making the 18, 21, 25, 30 going forward. Then it made sense to stop producing the 15. Now, it's not necessarily gone forever, but it's all a matter of just seeing how the stocks roll out over the next few years. But it's a beautiful whiskey. Don't get me wrong, big fan of the 15. But we did bring in the Legacy Series Chapter 1, which came in last year, which was the new sherry forward 48% whiskey. Brilliant whiskey. Again, no age statement, but you know, it was a sort of roughly around about a 10-year-old. Beautifully well received, and went down really, really well. So it was a totally different style to the 15, and there's going to be a new one of them for the next 2 or 3 years.
The 15 is actually still on the website, and just on face value of looking at it, the one thing I can say though, that the 15 and 18, just from appearance, seem to be a much similar. The 12, 15, and 18 are very similar. It's when you get into that 21, 25 year, it's a different whiskey. I mean, the maturation is just completely different. The color, I mean, it's
the 21, 25 are probably, they're all European oak sherry casks.
Right.
So, and then the 30 again, predominantly European oak sherry casks. So they're all matured in solely sherry. The 18 is pretty much all sherry. It's 50% first fill sherry. Where the 12 and the 15 actually were different was they both had an element of bourbon cask in them. So they used ex-bourbon casks. which just brought out that a little bit of that lighter style of Glengoyne, fruitiness, that sort of forward sweetness, a little bit of the vanillas as well. So, you know, it was like tropical fruits in the 15. It was a lovely whiskey, and the 12 a little bit more zesty. So, and then the 10 at the beginning is 30% first fill sherry casks and refills. So, you know, we use sherry in every single whiskey we produce, but we don't use bourbon in every single whiskey. That's really only in the 12-year-old at the moment.
So I have to ask a question, since we have Glengoyne. We have Glengoyne on our.
When is Chapter 2 coming out?
Legacy Chapter 2 will be coming out in the near future. Again, just with what is going on in the world, I'd like to say it is now, but I can't say that. So we need to just sort of wait and see. But it is due out, but we're not 100% sure, just because we don't know exactly what's going on in the world, if that's fair. But it is it's been selected. It's ready to go. We just need to push the, you know, the sort of button on it, as it were.
If and when we do make it to Glengoyne and we bring a busload of dummies, I just need to know, do they sample the 30-year-old there? Because I'm looking at a picture of that bottle and I just want to drink it off of this iPad. It looks absolutely incredible.
I'll tell you what, I will tell you tonight, if you make it to Glengoyne, I'll make sure you get a sample of the 30-year-old.
Look at that. Just go to the website, you guys, and look at a picture of that bottle. You're gonna be speechless for about 5 minutes.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. The 30 is beautiful, and actually very different to the 25. The 25's got a lot of first fill, so it's got that intensity. Actually, the 30 is a little bit more refill, so it's actually got a little bit. It's still intense, but it's just different to the 25, and it's a little bit 46.8% as well, so a little bit lower in strength, but 30s to die for. Yeah, beautiful whiskey.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, very good.
Over to the YouTube channel here. I was looking at the website, whatnot. So there was a question though. Do you have? Maybe I missed it. Did moving forward with batch 8, I guess is what we'll talk about. Is there plans to continue a larger batch run than? Like 7 was more than 6. Is it?
Yeah, it will be looked on as on an individual basis in terms of the what we're trying to achieve, in terms of the style. So, it's a long way off. I'm not sure. I would think it's certainly. I'm not sure. I'm genuinely not sure. I would think probably no bigger than what we've done for this one, but it could well be smaller. I'm not sure.
I kind of get the feeling they really don't have, that doesn't have anything to do with each other. I mean, they're individual, unique runs and what you're trying to accomplish. And if there's more, there's more. If there's less, there's less. And
yeah, that's exactly it. You know, if this, I mean, it's, you know, if it's just on the cast selection and it's just on the
right.
On the, you know, this is the one I want to use for this year. I want to use this 8-year-old. I want to use that 11-year-old. I want to, you know, all that sort of thing. So. It's a moving beast, but we won't be looking at that till towards the end of the year. So, a few other things to get through before. Although we'll be thinking about it already. So yeah.
Well, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is Tam Do.
Yeah.
So one of the things that always struck us from Tam Do's perspective is that bottle shape.
Yeah.
The angular, sexy bottle that the Tam Do has, and
sexy
color and everything with that. It's
beautiful.
Is there intended marketing for that bottle itself? What is the kind of the point of your custom unique bottle?
Well, it certainly is different, and that's what I like about it. There's no other whiskey. When you see a bottle of that, you go, that's definitely a Tam Do. If you took all the labels off, a lot of other whiskey bottles, you wouldn't be able to say that. So, Tam Do is not an old distillery. 1897. So it's 100. No, not at all. That's 131 years younger than the oldest distillery in Scotland. So that's pretty young, really. Or 121 years. Sorry, 121 years. So pretty young distillery comparatively. So the Victorian era has a big influence on this and on the distillery, and that is actually looks like where this came from. Is it's got that. I'm trying to think of the right word, but one of those soda dispensers. Do you know what I mean?
Ah, yeah,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
spritzer.
Yeah,
Carbonated.
that's where this comes from.
Okay.
That's the rough shape of the bottle. So it has a Victorian element to it, undoubtedly, and that is a huge part of, you know, Tam Do. It was built in the Victorian era, and it was the most modern distillery of its time. So that's why the bottle is that shape. It's I love it. I love it, and you combine it with the new box as well, and it just really showcases it on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
we've got the batch series here, which come in the tube cans, so you lose that. But yeah, I like the fact that you can show that bottle off and say, "Yep, that's Tam Do."
Yeah, exactly, and that was the thinking behind it. It was like, why have we got such a lovely bottle and putting it in a tube?
Yep.
The one you're holding up, Gordon, is the 15, and that's actually the one that I have pulled up on my iPad here, because I've never seen that one on the shelf here.
No, it's you'll find it, but it's limited. It's limited around the world. So, you know, America's a big place. It's not widely. You're not going to find it in every liquor store, but like Tamdhu, the distillery, which if you're in Speyside, you need to look for. You need to find it too. And when you do find Tamdhu as a whiskey, a lot of people go, oh, how have I not had this before? This is amazing. And that 15-year-old really, for me, is when we created it, having it at 46 really makes the whiskey, far less the wonderful sherry cask. So it was a real, it really has caused a stir. People love it, but you can find it. It is, I don't know where it is near you guys, but it is somewhere. You know, even, you know, some of the reviews.
There was a comment we put up that the DC area hasn't seen, or one of our best whiskey YouTubers or whiskey viewers. He goes all over DC and hasn't seen it in the DC area. So there's got to be around. Okay, Whiskey Mystery says it's $109 in California. So
a lot of people say it's amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing. It is amazing whiskey. Yeah, I mean, you can get it at K&L. You can get it at Binny's in Chicago. You can get it. You can get it in.
That's where we get it from.
Yeah, you can get it there. You can get it in. I mean, you probably might even be able to get it in one or two Total Wines. I don't know, but you can get it at Park Avenue in New York. I mean, but you just don't get it in every liquor store in New York. You'll get it at two or three. You'll get it in Florida. You'll get it in LA. It's just not widely available. But if you do enough searching on the internet, you'll find it.
Is it because there's not a huge selection of it, or is it just it's spreading out and?
Well, Tamdhu's starting from a pretty small base in the US. Glengoyne more well known. So our challenge is having limited stocks and selling it, and making sure that when it goes on the shelf of a retailer, it actually rotates. It actually goes out the other end. So, you know, that's all part of what we're trying to build with our distributor and our importer over there. So, but you will find it. And I mean, I've been into. I was in K&L when I was over in that part of the world last October, and did a session with them, and got a message from them 3 weeks later. So we've sold out of our whole stock of the 15. So, you know, it's just that, you know, because they bought into it, they thought it was a great whiskey, they loved it, and they started selling it, and that's the sort of thing you need to do. But it's just time and, you know, having the ability to do that. So we're going to do more of these.
Do you can you give away the percentage mix between Oloroso and PX on your Tamdhus?
Tamdhu doesn't use any PX. It's only Oloroso.
No.
There you go.
There you go.
Only
Ben.
Oloroso. Only Oloroso sherry casks. Full stop from start to finish. We don't finish. We don't use PX. We don't use Fino. We only use Oloroso. The one variable, we use American oak and European oak Oloroso sherry cask.
Ah.
So the American
there's
oak
the only
imported,
difference in influence.
Yeah. So obviously American oak produces, you know, it goes through the same process in Spain. The wood, American oak, is imported into Spain, as it has been for hundreds of years. The European oak's cut down in northern Spain, and the two woods go through the same cask making process, which is 6 years, and then they come to Tamdhu and Glengoyne, but the two types of casks. And that's where we get that's where we get the variables that we use to make Tam Do. So we've got first fill European oak, first fill American oak, and then refills. And then the other sort of variable is cask sizes, but butts, hogsheads. And that's how every Tam Do 12, 15, and batch strength is made. And it's different first fills of more European in this one, a bit more American in that one. That's how it's done.
Okay. Every question, is getting shelf space difficult? You have to fight for shelf space in liquor stores now?
Well, you do. I mean, when you're up against big companies like Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Beam Suntory, who've got lots of brands and lots of deep pockets to do lots of interesting things, then in terms of price, then that is difficult. And as an independent, it's difficult, absolutely. And with the US system, in terms of the 3-tier system as well, that makes pricing really difficult because everybody takes a slice.
Yep.
And you can't, as an independent, it makes life a little bit more complicated. But what you are seeing now in the US is a better online offering for everybody. But secondly, you're also seeing a better. There's now liquor stores who want to actually stock stuff that's not standard stuff. It's not, and I think that's been driven a lot by the bourbon industry. And there's so many wonderful bourbons and American whiskeys out there that are not the sort of ones that everybody's heard of, and they've gone out seeking for them. And now they're like the whole load of scotches as well that can do that. And that's, I think, just people wanting to try different things. And I think that's where, what we're saying to people, who want to drink Tam Do is we're going, hey, we know you love Glenfiddich, or you love this, or you love that. They're great whiskies. Tam Do's offering you something different. This is old Speyside sherry cask whiskey. And it's, it's what sherry cask whiskey 20, 30 years ago was like from Speyside. So that's where it's beginning to really garner. It's like pushing a snowball down a hill. It's getting there. It's getting bigger slowly.
But I think there's still some eclectic stuff. I'm looking at a Tamdhu 50 on your guys' website right now. I'd love to try that unique one. It says it's out of stock.
Yeah, we released that about 3 years ago and sold it out in about a month. So,
wow.
16,000 pounds.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I've just poured one actually. Beautiful whiskey. But I mean, beautiful. I mean, but our problem is
your address out there.
We've got a 50. We've got some whiskey of that age, but we don't have much in between that and 20. So that's the sort of stock issue.
Well, I was just curious. It's on the website, so I clicked the link just to see what it said about it. And I'm reading. It looks beautiful, and the stats on it look great. But then when you look down, you see the price tag, and you're like, "Ooh!" But yet it's still sold out. So maybe
it's sold out very quickly.
Wow. Yeah, to people that live different lives than I do.
Oh, got a question, Whiskey Mystery. I saw Tamdhu from an independent bottler, OMC maybe. Could it be Hogshead ex-bourbon in this case?
Quite possibly, yeah. Any independent bottlings of Tamdhu, and a lot of them are probably ex-bourbon or refill hogsheads, things like that. Everything that goes into this bottle is only Oloroso seasoned sherry casks, and that's the key point. So any of the proprietaries, the 3 products that we do, or any of the single casks that we've done, everything is Oloroso, and everything is fully matured from 0 to 15, 0 to 12, 0 to whatever. So there is no finishing, no nothing, and everything is
any of that kind of stuff. Double oak or anything. You don't double oak or rebarrel it or anything.
No, we just marry it together at the end. So it's just American oak, European oak married together at the end. So there's no moving whiskey from cask to cask. So
Ben has been asking some darn good questions the whole show, but he's got another one. And it's really interesting. Good thought, Ben. It says McLeod's have a Highland, a Speyside, and obviously now a Lowland. What about a Campbelltown in the future?
Wow. So we have a Highland, a Lowland, and a Speyside. Campbelltown, yes. And Isla, yes. Slightly difficult, to be honest. Just in terms of Isla's quite difficult because there's 3 distilleries opening up on Isla. Campbelltown, we don't have any immediate plans to do anything in Campbelltown, if I'm honest. I mean, I think
Let's
the
partner
offering.
up.
To be honest, I'm not sure. And here's the ultimate. I'm not sure we can do it better than Springbank, to be honest. They make great stuff and they're lovely people. But so no real. I don't think there's any real sudden urge to open a distillery in Campbelltown. Although
It was worth a shot, Ben. I thought it was a great question. And if they're looking for partners, Sean, the dummy that's not here, he's been dying to try to pick up a distillery and buy one in Scotland. So, I mean, if you guys are just looking for partners,
right? Okay.
We can bring some personality. I don't know how much cash flow we can bring.
Ian McLeod for dummies. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah, right. He said 10 million pounds.
Of course.
Not sure 10 million pounds is enough, actually.
Yeah, that's what's scary about it, right? That's the truth. But you're absolutely right. You said a number earlier, 130 something distilleries, I think, right? And honestly, over the last I would say over the last 10 years, there's probably been way more that have opened than have closed. I haven't heard of any really closing in the last 10 years. Have you?
No, there's been very few. There's been very few sort of bought and sold either. I mean, if you actually look at Bruichladdich, it was sold about 10 years ago, nearly. Obviously, Brown-Forman picked up a few distilleries about 3 years ago. There's not a lot of sort of any action going on. My slight worry, and I'm an optimistic chap. My slight worry is there's so many distilleries opening up now in Scotland that they're not all going to be successful because they're not all whiskey people that are running them, if you know what I mean. They're not people who know enough about the industry, and so there will be an element of things that fail, like like a lot of things in life. But there will also be some of as it's happened in the States as well. Some of the ones that are doing well might be snapped up by bigger producers as well. And you've seen that quite a lot in the States with the big guys cherry picking the ones that they want. So we'll see. But I mean, it's great, and the global rise of whiskey is great as well. It just means people are drinking whiskey, which for me is great. So.
Yeah, I mean, I see periodic cycles between clear spirits and brown spirits are really hot right now. Is there any, I know you've got gins and vodkas that kind of help balance that portfolio. How do you plan for that? How does a company that's independent, doesn't have a lot of investors in stock and things like that, how do they plan for the cycles of the market? When you're planning a whiskey 15 years out, give us any strategy tips.
I'm pretty good at that.
No, there is quite a bit of that. Firstly, if you look at the gins and vodkas, they're instantaneous. You can produce them pretty much as is. We don't have lots of volume in our whiskies. We're not sitting on loads and loads of whiskey, like some brands. So we have a growth plan for our whiskey portfolio, which is not. I mean, it's what's the word? It's positive and great, but it's not a massive rise, because actually in single malt, you don't want that, because if you start to sell too much young stuff, then you don't have enough for the older, and you have this sort of issue going through and it's happened so many times in the past. So we have to be quite aware of, how much we want to sell, and obviously as an independent family, you got to sell it for the maximum place. Why would you sell 200 cases of a 10-year-old over here when you can make more of over there and build the brand better, for example? So that's a big part of it. If you look at gins and vodkas and things like that, they're fairly instantaneous. So the rise of gin in the UK has been fueled by the ability for many people to produce gin in their back garden, basically. So whiskey for me is always the long-term banker. And it's a bit like the it's the shares that over time will slowly grow and grow. Okay, we've had a slight dip at the moment with what's going on, but over time shares will grow and grow and grow in the long term. Whiskey's the long-term game for me. The gin is a welcome sort of driver of cash, as it were, but it's also we've managed to build an amazing gin brand, which is revered for its quality and for its style and its flavors. So and that comes from the hard work of the guys who originally started it. So it's a really interesting thing, but it's taking opportunities when they come and understanding the long game, and that's the success, I think.
Okay.
Well, Gordon, we didn't get into a few of the brands, which we're out of time. We're running up on our hour, but to give you an opportunity to say anything and everything about some of your brands. I mean, what's on the horizon? Give us something to look forward to and to go to sleep tonight, hoping that it happens in the near, and we wake up tomorrow and this is all behind us, and then we have to look forward to what's on the horizon for Tamdhu, Glengoyne, maybe some of your other more popular brands, the Chieftains or the Sheep Dip, or just take us off.
Well, I mean, if we look at Glengoyne and Tamdhu into the future, we're always looking at creating something new, but also still relying on the things and relying on the stuff that's worked in the past. We're innovative, but we're also traditionalists, and I think that's very, very true. Quality of our whiskey will always come first. So, with Glengoyne, we've got some new whiskies coming this year. There'll probably be a new cask strength as well. And with Tamdhu, we've got the new batch strength is the main thing. Tamdhu is very much in a sort of slow growth phase. And then a brand we've not even mentioned tonight, Smokehead, is a very innovative brand, which is really going places around the world. And it's a single malt from Islay, but doesn't name a brand, doesn't name a distillery, but it's really saying if you want to drink smoky whiskey, drink Smokehead. We're not trying to, having worked for Bowmore and these are wonderful distilleries on Islay with a traditional wonderful history. Smokehead is a product of one of those distilleries on Islay. It's a product of 8 whiskey we bottle it and we say it's smoky, drink it if you like it. And it's a really, really simple brand. Smokehead excites me because it's doing something in whiskey which is in single malt, which is not there. It's got a skull on the bottle. I mean, what other single malt's got a skull on the bottle? None of them.
Does that distillery put them in your casks, or do you buy casks? What's your process?
It can be spirit or casks generally. Probably spirit.
So you won't tell us what you're doing?
No, absolutely not. No. Smokehead is just a wonderful whiskey, which is it's a peated Islay, and it's giving you something that is really, it's giving you great Islay taste without that rich history which other distilleries do really well. It's just saying, do you want smoky whiskey? Yes, I really like it. I tried it once. I'll buy it, and that is where it's really rocking. It's really going really well. So I'm excited by Smokehead.
So what we need to do is plan a longer show to make sure you have a little more of this to tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
You think?
Good idea.
Gotta loosen the lip.
Actually, it does sound fun. Something that the 4 dummies that we would do is to pour out that Smokehead and do a blind lineup against some of those traditional brand names that people do love, because I mean that we've definitely learned that blind tasting is really, let the spirit speak for you. I got burned on the Glengoyne teapot this year. Standing by itself, I was like, oh, it's great, it's good, but boy, it's just not as good as 6. And then we did a blind tasting, and which one did I pick? 7. I mean, it just
that's whiskey though. Some days you're right on a whiskey. The other days depends what you had for dinner. It's just not not working for you. That's why you need to have so many diverse whiskeys.
That's true. Well, We've definitely gone through a lot of what Ian McLeod is, and I've learned a lot about the brand itself. But I want to say it was great to finally get you on the show. Honestly, this has been a work in progress for quite some time. I'm really glad that you reached out to us. And I really hope that in the next year, when we do come to Scotland, we are coming. We're bringing a busload. We don't know who those. Hopefully, it's the same people that signed up for this year. But when we do, we definitely hope to cross paths with you, whether it's at the doorsteps of Glengoyne or Tamdhu or both or wherever that may be. We definitely. And when you come over to the States, you got to let us know.
I will drop in. Don't worry. I'll be in the States a lot, so I will be there. So we'll obviously keep in touch. But no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for your hospitality, and great to just talk whiskey and talk a bit about what we do.
Well, we love what you do. It's kind of why we even have the show. I mean, this isn't our job. This is just our passion. This is what we really get into. And we've got a ton of great people that watch the show and are interested and ask great questions. So the fact that you're taking your time to share it all with us, we really appreciate it. Can't say thank you enough, sir. We will cross paths, whether it's on this side of the pond or that side of the pond. And when we do, we're going to talk about that smokehead.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Virtual cheers.